this is Aaron at PowerPopaholic.com, and I am talking to the legendary Peter Holsapple, who is with the DBs and REM and Continental Drifters and Hootie and the Blowfish. He's been all over the place, but we're talking about the DBs today. And how are you doing today, Peter?
I'm good, Aaron. Thanks for having me on the show.
Great, great. I just wanted to, thank you for the music. I think a lot of the DB's work was sort of characterized as power pop sort of after the fact, after you guys had finished up in the 80s, basically people recognized afterwards that, hey, this is the connection between those older bands like, Big Star and Raspberries and the jangle bands like REM and the Connells and things like that happened in the early 80s. So, I remember also reading in one interview that you gave that you basically said, well, who do we really influence today? And I would say an artist like Mo Troper, who also does sort of some of the experimental music that's particularly found on the first album, stands for Decibels, would follow that template, as well as a lot of the lo-fi bedroom pop movement of the late 90s and into the 2000s. So I think you've definitely been a big influence on those bands and those artists. But
okay, I'll take your word for it. I think my main point about that was really that to have that kind of reach, you have to have sold a fair amount of records ultimately, which is why I think a group like REM influenced a lot of bands. So that's why I think I wasn't trying to be self-deprecating at all or say anything bad about the history of the DBs at all. It was really just the fact that we didn't have that kind of reach. That's why I was sort of suspect of the idea that we had actually influenced anybody.
Well, I think you did have a big reach, kind of like with Big Star. Big Star at the time of its existence didn't really have, many sales at all. And, but their influence has been felt decades later and continues to be felt. And I think the same thing of the DBs. And basically, we're also talking about the re-release or remastering of your first album, Stands for Decibels. And let's start at the beginning. So how did you guys originally all get together? I know you guys all loved garage rock music, and basically you all listened to Lenny Kaye's 1972 Nuggets compilation, and you guys had similar bands that you all liked, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have to also realize that like Will and I go back to third grade. So we've been friends for 60 years. And Chris, I've known for almost as long. And we played in a very, very active scene in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where we grew up. I mean, everybody was in a band, and all those bands played, and everybody had to kind of learn the songs correctly because everybody was watching you. And if you didn't play it right, they knew it. So by the time we got up to New York in 1978, we had cut our teeth. Chris and I and Mitch Easter had cut a record in 1972 called Rittenhouse Square. It's not a very good record, but we did get some actual time in a real live recording studio in Greensboro. So all of that stuff. And then, Mitch and Chris were people that had the first round of the Tascam or TAC 2340s, the 4-track recorders. So there was a lot of teeth cutting going on by the time we got to New York. And we kind of knew how to write songs. We kind of knew how to arrange. We definitely knew how to play our instruments. So I think that's where things got started. And yes, I would say that Will is quick to point out that we had two really good AM radio stations growing up in the 60s and 70s in Winston. And then Chris was the first guy to hear When My Baby's Beside Me on one of those two AM radio stations. And Will was the first guy in Winston-Salem who drove to Raleigh and found a copy of #1 record. So we were early adopters.
Well, I'm glad that you were early adopters and followers of that. So what really led you from New York, from North Carolina to New York? I mean, I know Chris went to school there, correct?
Well, Chris was in school in Chapel Hill, and then he moved up to New York ostensibly to play with a group called the Erasers. The late Susan Springfield was the leader of that band. And then that sort of fell apart. And then word got around that Alex was moved to New York and was looking for somebody. And Chris, of course, knew all the songs, knew all the big star stuff. So he was the ideal candidate. And he got in a band he was in the Cossacks with Alex and Lloyd Foneroff from Noise R Us on drums, and the late Frank Kowalski on keyboards from the Breakers and Big Help. Great, great keyboard player who is sorely missed. And then little by little, I think Alex moved back to Memphis, and Will said that Chris was starting to look for things to do. So he called Will and Gene, and they both moved to town and they started playing some shows. And I was, meanwhile, in Memphis myself and not having a great time of it, frankly. But I got a call from Will saying, Chris would like to know if you'd like to come audition to play keyboards. So I was like, let me think for a second. Yes. And so I came immediately, got on a plane and flew up there and auditioned. So, I mean, I like to date my arrival in New York as 2 weeks after television played their last shows at the Bottom Line, the farewell shows.
Wow.
And so it was a kind of that second round of bands, groups like the Ray Beats and the Flesh Tones, and the Flesh Tones had actually been around for a while anyway, but the Bush Tetras and the Bongos, and we had a lot of friends. The Scruffs moved up from Memphis. We were friends with them.
Yep.
In fact, there's a German picture sleeve of Shaken and Teenage Girls. It's got a picture of them playing at Great Gildersleeves, and one of our amps is in the background. So
you can identify the amp in the photo.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, the DBs, I thought, that first album also had a lot of sort of experimental things on it way ahead of its time, before new wave, I think, really started to catch on. But you did have some of those rhythms going through. Some of the songs there are pretty unique. You have Stands for Decibels, critically acclaimed. You didn't get, like you'd said, the sales weren't quite there. Repercussions comes out, the following year. That's sort of met with also critical acclaim. I don't know if it did any better sales wise.
Oh, it's hard to say. Neither of them came out in the States, so it was all very catch as catch can. I mean, Black and White had been at 45, and that was on Shake Records, which is Alan Betrock's label. And he also put out records by Randy Gunn from the Necessaries and the Cosmopolitans, which was Chris's girlfriend's band. And he put out the first 12-inch of Marshall Crenshaw. I think something's going to happen. So Alan was a really good listener. He sort of figured this stuff out. And so we got a little bit of headway with that, but we weren't able to get an American deal for either of the first two records. So the only way we got any sort of attention at all from radio was nice people bringing in their imported copies from England. And they would bring their copies into the station and they would play the songs there. So it was all, so this reissue of Stands for Decibels is actually the first time the record has come out on vinyl in the United States. Only 42 years later, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's great. Is Repercussions expected to be remastered and come out as well?
Repercussion is on its way. I believe it has gotten remastered as of last week. Same guy, Bob Weston, did a great job with the first record. And I think, that is supposed to also come out later this year.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific remaster. One of the things that bothered me about my copy of a copy of a copy from back in the day was the sonic mud that I found with a lot of the, the rhythm section that sort of gets bogged down. And it's so cleaned up here. You could hear everything as clear as day, which is
that's
amazing.
A good thing. Yeah, I mean, I will say that there were some reissues that were put out in the 80s on a German label, and they came out on white vinyl. And at that point, they hadn't really kind of figured out the way to make anything other than black vinyl sound any good. So those records all sounded like they had been mastered from somebody's copy of a copy of a copy of the cassette.
Right.
So I'm not surprised. And I'm glad you like the way this one sounds, because I've heard nothing but great great compliments about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I love the song. I was mentioned before. There were some songs there that really just stood out for me, like "Bad Reputation" and "A Big Brown Eyes." These are great power pop songs that, just you hear it and you're like, this could have come out, just a few years ago. Didn't sound like 40 years ago, whatever. It's
Thank you
amazing.
very much. Well, our goal in making our records over the years, and it's still to this day how I like to approach any sort of record making. But this is largely I can lay at the feet of Chris Stamey because he was just a smart guy. Who were very fortunate to have a guy like him leading the band. And we wanted to make records that you could listen to, presumably 40 years later, and hear stuff that you hadn't heard before, or find that stuff was really, you know, dovetailed nicely into other parts. I mean, Big Brown Eyes is like less than 2 minutes long, but there's a lot of miles on that song. You
Absolutely.
go a lot of places from the intro to the ending. And I'm happy to hear that you're hearing that as well. I hope
Yeah.
everybody that picks up a copy of Stands for Decibels and Repercussion is able to enjoy it that same way.
Yeah, I think it's great. Now, once we get past that era and Chris leaves the band, you guys get a little more, I would say, with the fashion, like as opposed to being more innovative, you sort of fall in line with what a lot of other bands end up doing with Like This and Sound of Music. And I guess I read somewhere that you felt that because the sales weren't there, you decided not to carry on. Was this a band decision or the label decided to say, hey, we're cutting you guys off? What happened there?
Oh, as far as that goes, when you lose the other songwriter of the band, and you're the guy that's been writing this sort of more, I mean, I don't want to say ordinary, but the sort of, you were saying how much you like the experimental stuff on the first record in particular. Again, that is largely Chris's stuff. Songs like Espionage and
Yeah.
Teardrip and the sounds that are on there. So when he left, a certain amount of that kind of experimental aspect to the band left with him. It's okay, and we carried on because Gene and Will and I enjoyed playing together. And we got a bass player from New Orleans, Jeff Beninatto, and we cut a couple more records. And we tried to get an American deal. We did get an American deal briefly with Bearsville, but that also had its problems because the label lost its distribution with Warner Brothers the week the record came out. And
Oh,
then Sound of Music came out on IRS after a couple of years of kind of trying to drag ourselves out of the Bearsville contract, and REM had really been our champions about you should go to IRS. They'll know what to do with you. So we went there, and then they disappeared, and it was sort of like, okay, but I mean, and we made a record that again. I feel like the songs were really good, but I don't know that the production for the Sound of Music is something that I particularly like. And we just found ourselves banging our heads against the wall after a while. It was like we weren't we were back to playing Tuesday nights for $100, And after 10 years of doing that and trying to sort of make some headway, we just felt like it was probably time to hang up. So we did.
right,
It was
right.
it
No,
was a
I get
band
it.
decision.
Okay, that's fine. So, is there any plans to have any of the other records like this or Sound of Music get the remastering treatment, or are you not sure yet?
We just sort of want to see what happens with these first two. Honestly, I will say this sort of goes along with what you're saying. I did a house concert tour, solo house concert tour a couple of years ago in the Northeast.
Hmm.
And ultimately, what I came away with was that the stuff that people most wanted to hear were songs from those first two records. Everything else, yeah, no, not really. They didn't, Sound of Music has been out of print since 1988, so there's not really a lot of opportunity for people to have heard that. We did a very nice record in 2012 called "Falling Off the Sky," which
Yes.
I thought that was a pretty great record,
Yes, it was.
and it's got a lot of. I mean, Chris again did the heavy lifting on that one, but it's a great, it's got great stuff, and so there's no, we're not ruling anything out, but we sort of want to play out these first two and see what happens with them. And if people are interested, maybe we'll put them out.
Okay, great. So once the band sort of breaks up at the end of the 80s there, you join REM. And
Yep.
it seems at that point, when you're with that band, that you sort of hit the highest profile that you hit as an artist, sort of, because they won a Grammy that, in the with Out of Time, and you're sort of on the top of the world. And then after 4 years at REM, you're gone there. What happened a little bit, because I don't know too much about how you left REM and ended up with the Continental Drifters afterwards.
Well, I was living in Los Angeles. I'd moved out to LA when we were mixing Sound of Music. And I started hanging out at this club called Raji's.
Mm.
And there was this guy, Carlo Nucia, who was this larger than life drummer from New Orleans that I knew a little bit. And he had just started this incredible band with a bunch of songwriters. Mark Walton from the Dream Syndicate, Ray Ganeshow from New Orleans, Gary Eaton from the Ringling Sisters. They had a keyboard player, Dan Magoo, who was playing with my then wife's band. And I would go down and see them play, and I was like, wow, this is really, really incredibly good stuff. So I got involved with them and decided I would start. I produced them first. And
Hmm.
then Danny, the keyboard player, decided he was in too many bands. And so I jumped in, and it seemed like the thing to do. And I joined the band, and we did a bunch of records, and we had a bunch of people defect from the group and leave, and then other people joined. Vicky Peterson from the Bangles, and Susan Cowsill,
Yep.
and Robert Mache, who played with Klaus Nomi and with Sparks, awesome guitar player. And we
Wow.
did a bunch of records. And there is actually, this is a good point to interject this. There is a biography of the Continental Drifters coming out in the fall that is called White Noise and Lightning, the story of the Continental Drifters, written by Sean Kelly, who you might know from A Fragile Tomorrow, a really,
Yes.
really fine band. And it's got a lot of interviews, and I just read it again for proofing the other day. It was a galley proof, and it reads great. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. So that's coming out. There's a 2 CD tribute to the Drifters
Wow.
of all sorts of people, from Rosie Flores to Marshall Crenshaw to Annie Clements, who was our babysitter and was the bass player for Maren Morris now.
Hmm.
Um, it's really great. And there's also a best of coming out on Omnivore recordings of,
Excellent.
of stuff
Excellent.
from
Well, we have
the
a lot of great, Continental Drifters material to look forward to. That's excellent. Love to
indeed.
hear that.
And then I will say also that the two things that I'm very, very proud of right now is I am playing lead guitar for a band who are on Bar None Records, Glenn Morrow's label out of Hoboken. The group is called The Paranoid Style. And it's a wonderful, wonderful band. They've done a bunch of records, and I played all over the latest record called The Interrogator. And they enjoyed me playing so much that they asked me to join the band. So I'm the lead
Nice.
guitar player for that band at the tender age of 68. And because they liked my guitar playing so much, I felt inclined to want to do another record. So I have done a new solo record.
Oh,
That is
awesome.
going to come out in January, and it is called The Face of 68. It's coming out January 17th, 2025. Keep your eyes peeled. Don Dixon produced it.
Oh, wow.
The bass player on the record is Robert Sledge from Ben Folds 5. The drummer is Rob Ladd, who played drums for any number of different. He was in the Pressure Boys, and he played with Alanis Morissette and Glenn Frey, and sorry, Don Henley.
Mm.
Just got confused. What can I say? And he also is now the drummer for the Connells. So,
Excellent.
and
Wow. And I really,
it's a really good record. And I played lead guitar, and I sound great. And no less than Tim Lee from the Windbreakers and
wow.
Bark gave me some big props on that last night. So I'm very, very proud of my achievement on that record. I hope everybody likes that, and they can pick up a copy of that too.
Well, I would encourage it. I mean, I loved your last solo album, Out of My Way. I thought that was a terrific statement. It also was so refreshing because it sounded, at least Out of My Way to me, sounded like you were saying, "Hey," almost like George Harrison's first record when he left the Beatles. He felt
Mhm.
a sense of freedom to be able to put out different types of songs, and I think that's what Out of My Way does, through a lot of different styles on that album, and that's why I really enjoyed it as well.
Well,
I
don't
also
tell
love.
anyone, but there's another solo record that came
Oh,
out on Omnivore called Game Day. Now, that one has
hmm,
got great songs, but the recording is all done at home. So I'm not as pleased with the way that sounds these days, but it is available if you want to hear it.
okay, all right, great.
But this new
Another.
record is the one to go for.
Okay, we'll be looking out for that new record, and I will be talking it up when I see it. Another sort of combo that I really enjoyed was when you and Chris got together for Mavericks, and you've done a number of records with Chris that
Yeah.
I enjoyed. And it always seems you guys work so well together. I really love Here and Now from 2009. You did a wonderful record. I just love the song Broken Record on that album. Fabulous song, great harmonies. I mean, you guys just, it's like peanut butter and jelly. I don't know how else to describe it when you're
I
singing
think that's
together and
a
when you're
really,
playing
really
together.
apt. That's a really apt description. I mean, neither one of us have got like world-class voices. We will be the first to admit that, but we enjoy singing together and having sung together for almost 50 years, if
Yeah.
not longer. We kind of know how to dip and dive with each other, and we try to write songs for that. So the last record that we did was one called Our Back Pages, and that is a
Yes.
collection of DB's songs that we did in a sort of the more acoustic, I don't want to say adult, but I'll say adult, the kind of format that's less pile driving, the way Will Rigby and Gene Holder make
Mhm.
DV's records.
Right.
So we did that, and that came out a few years ago. That was a Music Cares project first, and then Omnivore decided they wanted to put it out. So that's another record I'm very proud of, and we do a lot of DV's songs on there. And I mean, like I say, I'm a big fan. I'm Chris's biggest fan as a songwriter. Also, I will say that, and we should all be so lucky as to have a Chris Stamey in our lives to help. Because I don't know that I would have had much of a career without him. Honestly, he has always championed my work, and he's been a guy who has tried to get me out of my tendency to hole up and stay away from stuff. I guess I don't know. I don't
Well,
mean to be that way, but I'm a homebody, and he
no, I
gets me
get it.
out to do stuff. So
I totally get that. And is there any chance of you working with Chris again? I know he's been very busy the past 10 years. He's
yes,
come
in
out
fact,
with.
tonight he's playing, I believe, in Chicago with the Big Star Five group, which
Yep.
is this time it's John Hour and Jody Stevens from Big Star
Yep.
and Pat Sansone, and I believe John Sturrett from Wilco is out with them subbing for Mills, Mike Mills is out with the baseball project right now.
Right.
So, but we check in with each other on that sort of stuff. I mean, the first thing we're going to do is this fall there are a handful of DB's shows that'll be promoting the first two records, the reissues of the first two records. So those are going to be kind of what we're doing for now. And then, after that, we'll see what happens and when. I mean, I'm going to need to do stuff with my records. So
Okay.
I think he's also got, Chris has been putting out lots and lots of really good records over the years. He's done these sort of records of kind of, I don't want to say standards exactly, but they're sort of more almost like jazz vocal in a way. And some of them have got him singing, and some of them have got a bunch of people like Skylar Gudash and Django Haskins from the Old Ceremony and Brett Harris, and really, really some great vocalists. So he's done that, and I think he's got another record that's going to come out soon. He did that one. What's the one that's got a GTO on the cover? You've seen it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
But
that's his newest the newest album he just came out with.
yeah, I
Hold
can't
on.
think what the name of it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's called The Great Escape.
That's it. What a terrible fan I am, huh?
No, that's all right.
But that's a great record. He's done a lot of really good stuff like
Well,
that.
yeah,
So he goes
he's
back and
kind of
forth.
he's kind of thrown me off because in 2015 he had an album called Euphoria, which I thought was really good, and then he put out this standards album called New Songs for the 20th Century, which
Yeah.
I gave that to my dad because he enjoyed that, but
Oh,
more
that's
than I
great.
did. Because a lot
That's
of
great.
old standards, and of course back pages, our back pages with you. But what I want to just go back, I just want to wrap things up a little bit.
Of course.
What can you tell me a little bit about your years with REM and how that kind of ended? Was this was sort of because you were playing on with their albums for a while, you were doing really well with them, and then it was suddenly sort of Michael Stipe moved on, or tell me what happened there.
Okay, enough water has passed over the dam by now. I will say that there were some. We did a tour for almost a year behind Green. We went across we went to Australia and New Zealand and Japan, and then we toured across the country from Los Angeles to New York, and then we toured Europe. And then we
Right.
came back and we toured America again from New York to Los Angeles. And it was a long, long haul. And we did a lot of stuff. And they were starting to write some of the songs for what became Out of Time. And there was some questions about my involvement in what I felt my involvement was in the songwriting process for one song on that record. And it kind of came to a head, and they were not going to yield, and I was not going to yield. And I just thought, well, okay, then
Mm.
that's the way it is. That's cool.
So
And
you came.
I
So
was
basically,
never
you came to a
I was never
loggerheads.
going to be I was never going to be the fifth member of REM, as
Mm.
much as they could say that, and the lip service that was given that idea on things like MTV Unplugged. But it was always sort of couched in all but the fifth member. And that's fine because the four guys, they just got inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame
Yeah.
for good reason, because they had and have a relationship with each other that provided the world with some of the great songs of that era, and I think that that's marvelous. And I wasn't trying to be a jerk about it. I just felt like I had contributed to the songwriting, and it was explained to me in no uncertain terms that whatever it was that I had brought there was not part of the songwriting. And so, I was disappointed. It would have been great had I been included in that, but I wasn't. And a lot of time passed, and I didn't see them, and we didn't really talk about it. And then eventually I was at South by Southwest,
Hmm.
and somebody said, Mike Mills is looking for you. And I was like, okay. And so I ran into Mills, and Mills and I were always kind of the closest guys of that band.
Right.
And I was all arms around the neck, and it was great to see him again. So we just kind of moved on from there, as people will do.
That's true. That's
Can't
true.
really hold on to that stuff for the rest of your lives. And so I did that, and then we actually, the DBs, got invited to play at Carnegie Hall for a marvelous tribute to REM. And we started the show off, and we did Fall on Me, and we had Don Dixon get up and play with us also.
Wow.
And we did a little bit of we sort of did the sort of Shiny Happy People 3/4 time thing in the middle section of the song. But it was a lot of fun. And we didn't get to see Bill. Bill wasn't there, but we did see Michael and Peter and Mike, and that
Oh,
was
all
good.
right.
And I saw Bill for the first time in 40 years, 30 years, whatever it was. I'm not even sure how long it's been, but I saw him
Wow.
this year. Paranoid Style came down and played the Heathen's Homecoming for Drive By Truckers. We got to open one of those shows, and at their invitation, because they're big pals of Paranoid Style. So I got together with Bill for the first time in what seemed like a million years. We got together at like 5 o'clock in the morning because he's a farmer. So I worked, we wanted to work around the timing of being a farmer, and it was great. And so I'm very, very happy for them. And I am,
Oh,
these things.
that's great. It's good that, you could sort of look at the past and sort of say, I had my good experience, all well to everyone. There's no, recriminations that go on forever. You can't hold on to that
I
stuff.
look at my time with REM, and I think what a pleasure and a privilege to get to play those beautiful songs. And it was most of everything that we played. Peter would do a different set list every night. And so getting to play things like These Days and Life and How to Live It, and especially getting to play Perfect Circle. which
Mhm.
is one of Bill's most beautiful songs. You know, he wrote that song. He's not
Right.
just a drummer. He was a really integral part of the songwriting. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. So I'm going to wrap things up
yeah,
by telling people, check out the new Sounds Like Decibels album.
sounds
And
for that.
yes, and look
Stands
out
for
for,
that.
yes, and look out for all all these things that you'd mentioned, that all these the solo projects. You want to repeat them for me?
Yes, I will. Stands for Decibels. It's out now. Repercussion coming out this fall.
Yes.
Biography of the Continental Drifters. White Noise and Lightning being published this fall. This fall. 2 CD tribute to the Continental Drifters. This fall. This fall. The best of the Continental Drifters, also entitled White Noise and Lightning. Paranoid Style. The Interrogator. Great record from last year. I'm all over that. January of 2025. The Face of 68 by Peter Holsapple. That's me, baby. That's the new me. I reinvented myself one more time.
That's
So
awesome. That's
bring it
awesome.
on.
Yeah, thank you, Peter Holsapple.
Thank
I
you,
so
Aaron.
much appreciate you, and I want you to keep going, keep making that music, man, because we love it. The listeners at Power Popaholic and followers love it. I want you to keep moving on, and let's get the DBs as much ink as possible, so people really can rediscover these classic albums and also your own talent as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and I hope everybody gets to enjoy something by the band and something from everything else I've gotten to do.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, take care.
All right.
Bye.